Golden Black Live, Friday, November the 13th. And we have a few things to discuss today, but welcome to the show. I want to say thank you quickly to our sponsors, Triple X, on the hill but on the level, of Purdue tradition since 1929. And of course, John Basham and the good folks. You can look right behind Kyle's head. John Basham and the good folks at Basham Rentals, Hilton Garden Inn. When tomorrow's a big day, State HGI tonight, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson, about as big a Boilermaker fan as you can get. He'll be maybe working a high school football game as well tonight. Guys, nothing's going on in the world of Purdue sports in the last 24 hours. Obviously, the top of mind awareness stems from Morgan Burke's announcement on the BTN last night that Darrell Hazell will be here through 2016.
Not a big shocker, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we as we posted on the board, well, I guess a week ago, when the news was leaked by somebody to national media who, reported that Hazell would be back in 16. There'd been really not a whole lot of grumbling otherwise. So, not very surprising that, at least as of right now, is the decision that has been made with Hazell.
Well, grumbling maybe in the national standpoint, there may be some grumbling by Purdue fans.
Yeah,
we'll
Purdue
see,
fans
but-
are grumbling.
Well, there's lots of grumbling among Purdue fans, as there should be. I mean, the record is historically futile, and I think a lot of it's assumption. But when you look at the situation, a lot of other things have to fall in place before you make a coaching change. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination this has been a successful 3 seasons. You cannot make a justification. And when Morgan Burke comes on TV and says there are positive things going on that are gonna bear fruit down the line, it would be interesting to know what those things he's perceiving to be are. But you also have to look at the fact that they do have an issue with the contract. It is a suffocating contract financially. There are some moving parts potentially around the coach that have to be settled before you can go on an endeavor as big as replacing your head football coach, which is a huge, huge deal that has years and years and years worth of ramifications. So it's not something you just do and go hire somebody else. You have to have the right infrastructure in place to be mobilized to do that sort of thing. That's financial, that's structural within your athletic department, all sorts of things. And I think the most likely scenario here has been just that Hazell would come back next year. There's almost certainly changes on his staff, and then some other things fall into place that can put them in a position down the line to make that decision later.
If that decision has to be made, that I think it stands to reason. We've certainly looked at this as we tend to do for just because of the performance on the field. I mean, you win 6 games in 3 years. There's a little debate even among Morgan Burke said last night that the results have not been good, and that's stating the obvious. But there also is a thing called recruiting and being able to get that figured out too. And it's been a rough week, Brian. We talked about that in terms of there have been some decommitments, and trying to keep a recruiting class together is going to be a big challenge for Darrell Hazell.
Right. The immediate question I had last night was, why now? Why is he choosing to say this after the Illinois game? But if it is a recruiting matter, there's a lot of things you can do related to recruiting. If this was a recruiting-minded decision, remember when he extended Danny Hope a few years ago, he did it essentially 2 weeks after Danny Hope needed the extension because he had just spent December recruiting. Now, if you're making decisions with your head coach based on recruiting, the logical thing to do is to not only keep Darrell Hazell next year, but to extend his contract in the spring so he can credibly go out to recruits and say, not only am I staying, but I have a long-term commitment from Purdue. Whether that's going to happen or not, we don't know. Morgan Burke will tell us he will do it after the season. Last time he did it with Danny Hope, he did it before the bowl game, so he didn't do it before the season. So I think just kind of all bets are off right now in terms of how they're going to manage this thing.
Yeah, it does. It becomes an interesting situation just because you have to, you do have to continue to get players in here, and And if this thing is going to turn around, one would think that talent would have something to do with it. A little bit of stating the obvious from that standpoint. How do you think, Daryl Hazel and he's tried to be positive with the way things have, that things are getting better. And 2 weeks ago, we saw some of that, certainly with the win over Nebraska. The step back is just a hard thing to explain, I think, for any of us to sit there and say, well, the variability of play, which is what got Danny Hope into trouble, has been a bugaboo for Daryl as well. That's an open-ended question for you, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of easier to explain why they did so poorly against Illinois. I mean, it looks like the Nebraska win now when you look back at it, and even the day after when we're looking at it, you can sort of explain how it is that they were able to score so many points against the Cornhuskers and sort of where Nebraska was at. I don't know how much variability there has been. They haven't been very good. And they haven't had as many peaks maybe as what Daryl Hazel would want you to believe there have been. We talked a lot about a roller coaster this week, and the roller coaster hasn't gone up enough, certainly. And they've been down too often, and Illinois was really down. I just you look at how that game went. They didn't scheme well, I don't think. They didn't play well, and that's a pretty bad combination.
Yeah. To the variability point, the thing with the Nebraska game is, yes, a backup quarterback turned the ball over 5 times, gave Purdue 4 touchdowns. But at the same time, Purdue made those plays.
Yeah.
They executed throws. David Blau threw a great fade to D'Angelo Yancey in the end zone. He threw that ball on the run to Yancey coming down the sideline. Yancey sheds the tackler, goes 83 yards for a touchdown. Those are still functional, competitive level
Plays.
Big Ten football plays that Purdue made in that game, and then they come out against Illinois and they do nothing. And that's the second time that's happened. Because now the same thing with Michigan State. Now I'll be the first to admit that if Michigan State doesn't fumble that punt, that may never be a game. That game might have ended 32-0 or something like that, 35-0, something like that. We don't know. But Purdue showed a pulse in that second half against Michigan State, and then came out against Minnesota when everybody thought they were going to win. I think you can generally say safely that everybody around the program was really confident
they were going to
win.
Illinois,
I mean everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone was confident they were going to win that football game. And they just didn't show up. And that's where the variability of play comes in. And variability of play, i.e. inconsistency, was one of many reasons the last coach got fired.
Yeah. Question, and a question that Brian's already kind of alluded to about the comment 100% heading in the right direction, which I'm not sure is a direct quote in terms of where this program is headed. Daryl Hazel is certainly, there are a lot of things that he does. He's a guy that's absolutely brought a level of respect in terms of the way he handles himself and the way that for the most part academic and off the field issues have been for the most part pretty good. It still has to come down to, though, and I think everybody, including Daryl Hazel and Morgan Brick, said you got to win football games, and you have to be able to attract talent. That's one of the big things that's just tough, is the fact that you're trying to hold a recruiting class together. It's not going to be a big class in the first place, and you've lost 4 guys in the last.
I don't want to pin all their trouble this year just on talent, because I think they do have enough talent to win a couple more games here. But they, top to bottom, this roster still has to get more talented. I mean, that's all recruiting. I mean, they have to. And right now, it's not trending correctly. You've lost 4 commitments to this class, down to 7 now overall for what's going to be a middle of the pack class. They're looking
small class too, only 15.
Only 15
or so.
So you got to have more talent in the program. Because Purdue's struggling right now, and you start to think, well, what personnel changes could Purdue make? What young guys could they go to bring some energy? And we sit there and look at the 2 deep and look at some of the guys out there on the scout team, and you're just like, there's nobody sitting right there who you're like, yeah, get that guy in, because maybe he can be somebody that changes momentum on a Saturday. They're just not those people. They're playing the best guys.
Well, recruiting's part of it, talent's part of it. Obviously, the recruiting rankings have been what they are and predictably summarily dismissed by everybody at Purdue. But Purdue is not the most talented team out there by any stretch of the imagination. But talent is part of it. Player evaluation is part of it. Player development is a big part of it. Scheme is a huge part of it. There are a lot of college football teams out there with less or equal talent to Purdue that are playing competitive football. They might not all be in Power 5 conferences, but there are a lot of teams out there with like talent to Purdue that are playing at a much higher level, that execute on a more consistent basis, that just look the part of a competitive football team more often than Purdue has the last 3 years.
I think Northwestern probably is a more talented team top to bottom than Purdue, but what they do best is Northwestern knows what they are. They know what their offensive
Yeah.
scheme is. They know what their defensive scheme is. They recruit players to those schemes. They coach them into those schemes, and they do well in those schemes. And you look at Purdue, and on a week-to-week basis, we're saying, what is Purdue doing offensively this week?
Yeah.
Is this going to work this week? Why are they struggling to tackle this week? Some
Yeah.
very basic things that, I think Saturday is a pretty big distinction between two programs.
Yeah. Identity is one of those terms like culture where you don't really know what it means until it's not there.
Yeah.
And right now, I think at Purdue, you know exactly what identity means because they have been just reacting to things for 3 years now in terms of what they're trying to do. And they've been trying to do a lot of everything without being able to do anything. And I think that's something they probably wanted to get established right away. Maybe some personnel issues right out of the bat in 2013 probably prevented them from establishing what they wanted to get established, and they've been kind of playing catch-up ever since.
All right, we'll look at Northwestern Purdue tomorrow. Kyle and Brian, we've all had a hand in looking at the Wildcats. And you've mentioned Northwestern 7-2, in line for a New Year's Day bowl, maybe not a selection committee bowl, but this is a program that had 2 years where they didn't get to where they wanted to. They seem to be back, and yet you do get the feeling, and I'm not dreaming away a Purdue win here, but you do look at Northwestern, they don't scare the living heck out of you in terms of what they bring to the table, especially offensively.
Yeah, they only average 21 points a game, but I think their defense is pretty good. I think, in particular, their defense does some things pretty well. It will negate some of the things that Purdue feels like it does well. Their defensive ends play a little spread out wide. Their cornerbacks are going to sort of set on routes a little bit, set on those underneath routes. And that could cause Purdue a whole lot of problems because Purdue has not thrown the ball over the middle of the field, and they have had limited success throwing the ball down the field. And I think those are the two areas that they can, maybe win some.
What are the opportunities for Purdue tomorrow? I mean, in terms of psychologically, this is a tough spot too because Northwestern's senior day. The
Yeah.
Wildcats have a lot to play for. Purdue's going to have to dig deep to find the motivation, I think, to stay in this football game.
Yeah, I mean, you just try to figure out a way to. I don't know if Northwestern's going to run an offense that's going to blow you out. Now, Northwestern can really run the football. Justin Jackson's really good. The
Yes.
quarterback is a running threat, and that's scary considering Purdue cannot tackle right now, cannot seem to be in the right place in the running game. Purdue has just fallen off the map in its run defense. It was never good, but it was at least competitive there for back-to-back weeks, and that has since fallen off the map. You really worry about Northwestern going for 300 rushing yards again and then just killing the clock, just not giving Purdue a chance. But if Purdue can keep it close, which is the way they seem to want to manage games, and then be able to make a play at the end, you never know. But obviously the deck is pretty stacked against Purdue here on paper.
Yeah, Northwestern I think it's just 2 touchdowns is a favorite.
Just.
Yeah, from that standpoint. Well, I mean, but, when you got one team that's 2-7, one that's 7-2, that's okay. 14. That sounds right. But
Northwestern has found ways to win games, though, and
Travis
Purdue
Still
has
does a great job.
This is still the same team that lost back-to-back games a couple of weeks ago by
They
an
scored
average score, like a
79-10.
combined score to 79-10 or something like that. So
78-10.
Northwestern is not invincible by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a matter of whether Purdue can summon enough to be competitive in a game like this.
Those two teams that they lost to, though, have a combined 2 losses.
They're not
Iowa
bad.
and Michigan.
They're not
They're
bad.
pretty good.
They're
They're not bad, but I would say that again, I have a hard time buying in. Ohio continues to get the job done. They went to Bloomington and got the job
Their
done.
resume
last
is
week.
better than Ohio State's.
Yeah, I know. You keep saying that, but
True.
and they're going to have. We'll see at the end of the year, but maybe they'll be the ones that'll be undefeated. And Ohio State gets beat by Michigan State or Michigan and never gets there. You never know from that standpoint. All right, so you see predictions have gone up on the site yet?
Not yet.
No,
They haven't done. I haven't even. put
Okay,
them
we'll
together.
get them up there.
We don't want to give it away now?
Well, I think
Is that
this
our
could be a
policy?
hedge. No, I think
I
it's
think you
going
knew who I'm picking. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
I-
Northwestern.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick Purdue. No, I had not. I have been wrong every week in every game.
You were right at Indiana State. You picked Purdue.
And I was right with Michigan State and Wisconsin. Okay, so I'm not doing well. I'm gonna just go ahead. Do you want to give us?
I haven't decided on my prediction score yet. It probably something in the range of 28-14 or something like that. I have to keep reminding
That's my
myself.
score.
I know.
I have to keep reminding myself that the Purdue end of the score has to be divisible by 7. because Purdue has still not tried a field goal.
I
in
don't know
Big
if
Ten
that's going to
play,
be a
let
new
alone
Big
made
Ten.
one.
That's going to tie a Big Ten record if they don't.
Has anybody ever gone through an entire conference
Well,
season
not
without
since-
trying a field goal?
Not since they had the straight ahead kickers.
Not
back in the
making,
50s.
trying,
Yeah, I know.
trying a field
The
goal.
craziest thing about that stat, more crazy than that, is Purdue has not had a situation
Where
where
they
you
were-
have felt like, man, they should be kicking a field goal here,
That
even
is
in
true.
Big Ten.
That is
play.
true. But when you keep having to go for it on 4th and short in the red zone, you're just
Yeah.
asking for disaster.
Or you're in a position
Because this
where
team
you-
has no margin for error. And
Yeah.
when you're in situations where you can have points and you just don't take points, that's scary.
All right, we will not scare you anymore as we're going to take a
at
2-minute
the
break,
15.
kick Kyle out, bring Craig Terrell in. We'll talk about a whole host of other things. Not only his musical, we still wanted to have this as our first live
Yeah,
show with
should have
music.
been.
I don't know why we
First live set.
we'll have him come
We'll
and
do
play
that.
something for us. We screwed up on that, so we're not doing well ourselves. But we are going to talk some football. We'll talk a lot of things about Craig Terrell's life, which is interesting in its own right. We'll look forward to doing that in a couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.